Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Finding the Present Value of a Life Care Plan. This session is hosted by Medical and Life Care Consulting Services, a Massachusetts-based case management and nurse consulting firm. We're so excited to have you join us for this discussion. My name is Dane Ledcavage and I serve as the Marketing Director at MLCC. I'll be your moderator for today's Medico-Legal webinar. The session is expected to run for approximately 50 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A where we'll address your questions. After the webinar, we'll share the recording, presentation materials, and templates on our website under the webinar section. To begin, I'd like to introduce our CEO, Cynthia Bourbeau. Cynthia Bourbeau is the president and founder of Medical and Life Care Consulting Services, Inc. She's a registered nurse, certified rehabilitation nurse, case manager, nurse care life planner, and legal nurse consultant with over 40 years of nursing experience. Since founding MLCC in 2001, Cynthia has led a team of professional nurse consultants and case managers specializing in medical case management, life care planning, and other medical legal services. She's an active member of the American Association of Nurse Life Care Planners, a board member on the CNLCP Certification Board, and a member of the Association of Rehabilitation Nurses and the Case Management Society of America. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Cynthia Bourbeau.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for this year's first medical legal session, we're discussing finding the present value of a life care plan. And we're pleased to have Dr. Craig Moore with us. I want to just personally say that I have enjoyed working with Dr. Moore over the years. And so we're very appreciative of him being here today and sharing his knowledge. Dr. Moore is an accomplished expert in political economy, management, and legal consulting with decades of experience across academia, industry, and litigation. He served as a university professor of political economy at the University of Massachusetts Amherst from 1972 to 2003, and later managed Marox Corporation in Holyoke, Mass., a contract manufacturer of medical implants and instruments from 2003 to 2006. For over 40 years, Dr. Moore has been an independent management and legal consultant, providing expert testimony in personal injury, wrongful death, employment discrimination, medical malpractice, and business dispute cases across the United States. He played a key role in preparing over 100 claims related to the September 11th, 2001 tragedy. Dr. Moore has also contributed significantly to workforce research and healthcare policy. Over the past decade, he has developed nurse workforce models for Massachusetts, Ohio, Louisiana, Maine, and Nebraska, while consulting with additional state centers for nursing. A widely published and sought-after speaker, he has lectured extensively throughout the United States and Europe. And so with that, once again, welcome, Dr. Moore, and I'm going to turn everything over to you so that you can begin. So thank you for being here.
We just asked Dr. Moore to unmute himself. I'm sorry about that. There you go.
Okay. This should be fun. I have spent a lot of time with nurses in particular and with other medical staff, and have worked with people on life care planning for some number of years. And over the years, I've seen life care plans sort of evolve from simple plans to much more sophisticated programs. Today, what I'm going to do is show you quickly sort of what goes into a life care plan from my standpoint, and then we're going to get right into how do you find the present value and what is the present value of a life care plan. There we go. So in creating a life care plan, we want a well-defined plan that includes categories of patient treatment and the frequency of that treatment and care. And a lot of the time you spend goes into writing those categories and descriptions. So for example, some categories might include projected evaluations, therapeutic modalities, future medical treatment, and so on. I've seen lots of different categories for different kinds of patients, but what we want to do is break the Lifecare plan into those categories that can be looked at individually and treated differently with respect to present value. Next slide. So each of these categories is then described in the Lifecare plan. You don't tell the particular medical procedures that are undertaken or treatments, the products used, the unit cost, the frequency of administration, services provided, and so on. It takes each category and breaks it into pieces or components, and I usually call those the elements of the plan. Now we start to get into some of what I want to really deal with. There are two things that we have to adjust for or take care of when we cost out a Lifecare plan. We have to be aware of the general inflation in the economy. You know, from all the publicity and what's going on in the last election and so on, inflation is a real problem, and it goes up and it goes down. A year and a half ago, we were at the 40th year high. It also moves around a lot because the general inflation is affected by policy of the Federal Reserve and by government spending, expenditures, and the federal budget. A lot of things affect inflation. Technology can, new sources of minerals or materials, changes in the supply chain, they can all affect inflation. Lately, our inflation is being impacted by bird flu. That's why egg prices are up so high. In addition to the regular inflation that we have to be aware of and adjust for, we have medical inflation. Medical inflation is typically over and above or greater than general inflation. The general inflation may go up by, say, 3% over a year. But in addition to that, during that same year, total medical costs or average medical costs or the mix of medical costs may go up another 2%, so that the overall inflation that affects the Lifecare plan would be 5%. I mentioned over on the left that the Bureau of Labor Statistics provides on the internet a calculator that can help you make adjustments in inflation, make calculations between two time periods, and that's very handy to know about. You can Google it very simply by putting CPI, CALC. So CPI for Consumer Price Index, CALC for calculator. Okay. Here's just a simple flow chart of what I've been talking about. What we started with in the Lifecare plan are the unit costs of treatment. What's it going to cost for a particular procedure or treatment for a patient? How often are we going to see that treatment over the lifetime of the patient? what's the frequency of the treatment. If we multiply the frequency times the cost, we come up with what the future value or what we're going to have to spend for that particular element in the life care plan over the lifetime of the patient, over the lifetime of the plan. So then we have to take that future value and we have to first adjust it for medical inflation. We have to say by how much is that going to go up over time just because of medical inflation. Now, there are a few things that you'll run into sometimes where medical inflation is not a factor, such as transportation or certain kinds of equipment. So you won't add a medical inflation factor to those elements, but most elements do have inflation that happen because the changes in technology and supply in the medical field keeps driving up prices. Then we have to adjust for the general inflation. Not only are we going to increase the cost of the plan by what medical inflation is going to be, but also what the general economy is going to add to that. So the medical inflation plus general inflation, we're going to end up with a higher future value. Then we're going to take the present value of that element or total cost, and that'll become clear as I go through an example. Medical inflation, here's a graph that shows you the general inflation and medical inflation, and it's a little small, but you can see in this red line that since 2022, medical inflation has really been going up from 5% a year to 7.7. We can also see that the general inflation has been changing as well, and lately during the same period has actually been going down. You can see some dips in certain years when we've had a general inflation or deflation in the economy. Well, what do we do with these numbers? How do we use them? Well, here on the next slide, I'm going to show you. These are the most recent industry projections from healthcare consulting companies. You may be familiar with some of them. WTW is Willits Towers Watson. They've changed their name now to WTW. Aon, Mercer in New York, Siegel, PwC, and Buck. There's also actuarial companies that put out reports every year or two about what they predict medical inflation to be. They go through the industry and they look at all the factors that are affecting medical inflation, and they come out with an opinion. What I do is I take the opinions of, let's say, 6 large consulting companies in healthcare, and I average them. They're between 6.4% and 8.5%. I'm going to average them, and it's going to come out to 7.82%. I'm going to use that to make estimates. I'm going to say, okay, it might be a little higher, a little lower, but a reasonable number for medical inflation is going to be about 7.82 based on these company projections and studies. So that gives me a medical inflation factor that I'm going to use to increase the value of the life care plan. Let's look at the next slide. So now what we're going to do is for each element, or category of care, we're going to prepare a spreadsheet. So when I do a report that's showing the present value of a life care plan, there's typically an appendix or two appendices, because there may be more than one plan, and they may contain anywhere from 6 or 8 up to 12 or 15 separate spreadsheets, depending on how many elements or categories of care that patient's going to need during their lifetime. And I'm going to show you one of these in a few minutes. The first column in the spreadsheet is going to show the year followed by the patient's age to their actuarial life expectancy. Most all of you know that there are actuarial tables that are maintained by the government, by insurance companies, that tell you, given a person's present age, how much longer they're likely to live, what their life expectancy is on average. Sometimes we adjust this number. Someone may have a chronic disease that's going to shorten their life expectancy. We may make allowances for different other variables that can affect it. The next column will show the current average cost of each element. So we take that cost figure, we say, okay, for this element, here's what the unit cost is. And if we take that unit cost and we take it times the number of years, we come up with the total cost for that element in the plan. Okay. The number of rows in the table will equal the life expectancy of the patient. So there's going to be in this spreadsheet a row for each year they're going to continue to live and be treated. All right, next slide. Now when we come up with that future value, we're going to have to reduce it to present value. So here's a little explanation of what present value is. Present value is a financial term that's used to describe the time value of money. It's the amount of money you would have to invest at the present to reach some future amount. Let's say the total cost of your plan. The amount needed in the future is called the future value. The future value of a life care plan then has to be reduced to present value. We have to determine how much money would have to be invested today to meet the cost of that plan over the years involved. Let me give you a simple example that might help. Suppose I had a new grandchild born today, and I wanted to put aside $20,000 for the freshman year in college of that new grandchild. Well, that child isn't going to go to school, to college, for 18 years. So I don't have to put $20,000 in the bank today and leave it there for 18 years. Instead, what I can do is put a smaller amount of money that earns interest, and that principal that's invested plus the interest is going to equal that future value. The amount that I have to invest that's going to earn interest is the present value. It's the present value of that future investment, that future cost. So let's go to the next one. Calculating the present value is really fairly simple. The present value, PV, is equal to the future value divided by 1 plus the rate of return, the interest rate that gets paid on the investment, raised to the number of time periods it's invested. Now this simple formula shows you what the present value would be for a future value for a period of 1 year. Because T is just equal to 1, the R is equal to the annual interest rate. We just plug in the numbers. Let's do that on the next slide. Assume that we can earn 2% per year interest on funds that are invested. R equals 0.02. The future value, let's say the future value we have to come up with is going to be $10,000. Okay, if we take $10,000 and we divide it by 1.02, we get $9,803.82. If you take that $9,803.82 and find out how much that's going to be worth in a year when it's invested at 2%, it's going to come out exactly to $10,000. So this is an example of how present value can work with simple numbers. Let's take a look at a little more complicated example. We frequently use compound interest. That is, we pay interest on interest earned in previous periods. Compound interest refers to how often interest is paid on an investment. So the interest rate on any particular investment can be compounded annually. You can do it yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, or continuously. Typically, it's done monthly for many applications. So in each period, we calculate the interest on the original investment, and then we add the accrued interest from previous periods. Let's take a look at what that looks like as a formula. So if I'm going to compound monthly, I'm going to say the present value is going to be equal to my future value. And I'm going to divide it by 1 plus, and here's what changes, R divided by 12. I've taken the annual interest rate and I've made it into a monthly interest rate by dividing it by 12 months. And then instead of raising it to T one year, I've said, let's make T the number of years and let's multiply it by 12. So that exponent becomes a number of months that I'm going to earn interest. So this is really a simple change from an annual interest problem to a monthly interest problem. Okay. You could, if you wanted to do it quarterly, you divide by 4 and multiply by 4. If you wanted to do it weekly, you could divide by 52 and multiply by 52. You just have to make sure it's consistent. All right, let's look at the next slide. Now, the general rate of inflation applies to all goods and services. And while the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve Bank, especially the one in St. Louis, and several other institutions regularly make projections of the general inflation, they're almost always wrong. Why are they wrong? They're wrong because inflation is controlled by the monetary system and the government, and they keep changing it and raising and lowering interest rates to try and keep inflation where they want it as a matter of policy. So you can't find a good projection of what the general inflation is going to be. But you do have to adjust for that general inflation in terms of the value of your Lifecare plan. So how are we going to overcome that challenge? Here's what we do. we invest in something called Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, or TIPS for short. And they provide a tool for guaranteeing that the future value of a life care plan will be accurately adjusted for the general inflation in the economy. How do they do that? Well, to begin with, these are government securities, and you can't lose money on them. They are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. The rates for these securities are published by the Federal Reserve daily. You can find them in the Wall Street Journal, on the internet, but they stay about the same. They don't change much, but they are established in the market at an auction among investors. Okay, next slide. So TIP securities typically pay a lower rate of return. Why? Their rate of return, people are willing to take a discount on the rate of return, on the interest rate earned, because they're going to get the inflation back. It's going to guarantee them they're not going to get hurt by inflation. These securities are sold by various maturities, 5-year maturities, 7-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year. And they can be traded on the market. You can buy them and sell them. So they're liquid. They're a very good liquid investment. Let's look at the next slide. So the present value of lost future medical treatment and care can reasonably be determined in situations where the plaintiff will require long-term care and treatment. I showed you how to do that by using the projections of healthcare consultants. I think we might have skipped a slide. Let's see. Oh, maybe not. Okay, well then let's see. All right, let me just go back a slide and I'll just tell you about it. I guess there's another slide I thought I had. So what you do is this. When you want to fund a life care plan, let's say it's going to cost over the lifetime of the patient $10 million. You go into the market and you buy TIP securities so they mature as the patient gets older. And each of those maturities will have a slightly different rate. You're going to use the present value formula to figure out how big your investment has to be to accomplish funding the life care plan. Okay, and I'm going to show an example of exactly how we do this. Go to the next slide. I think we're missing a slide here, but not a problem. So this just is redundant. Let's now what I want to do is show you a spreadsheet. It's a separate file. So can you bring that spreadsheet up?
Greg, I will let you drive from here, okay? Do you have it up?
Okay. So this is a spreadsheet, and again, you do one of these spreadsheets for each element in the plan. So here's one that says medical treatment, but it could say diagnostic therapy, it could say transportation, it could say, so I'm using this as an example. This is for a patient that's going to be treated for 20 more years. So the first column has year 1 through year 20. And what it's going to cost each year for that medical treatment, I'm just making these numbers up, is an average annual cost of $20,000. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust for medical inflation. We're going to take that 20,000 and say, well, by the end of the year, how much bigger is it going to be? And here's the formula that tells me that I put in this box. I take B5, okay, B5, 20,000 times 1.0275. I grow it or give myself interest, make inflation go up by 2.75%. Okay, so this is what it's going to be at the end of the first year. The next year, it's going to take this number, C5, and do it again. And then it's going to do it for C6 and C7. And it's going to keep adding interest. So I'm getting interest not only on the $20,000, but I'm getting it on the interest that's been paid in previous periods. So this now is what it's going to cost each year. This really is the future value. This is the future value in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And if I add them up, here's what the plan is going to cost me. This element of the plan is going to cost $538,357. That's what it's going to cost me for medical treatment for 20 years, including medical inflation. Now we go to the next step. We're going to reduce this to present value, and at the same time, because we're investing in T.I.P.S, we're going to adjust for inflation, the general inflation. So here's what the present value looks like. This says loss divided by 1 plus that interest rate divided by 12 raised to the number of years times 12. This looks pretty much like the earlier monthly present value formula, but because it's in Excel, I put this at symbol at the beginning of loss so it doesn't spill down. That's a way of controlling how it appears. And this is divided by 12 because we're doing it monthly. And this is the number of years, A5, which is 1 year times 12 months. So this is really being raised to the 12th power. When I do that, it tells me I would have to invest $20,208 at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, I would have been able to spend $20,550 because I would have had interest to spend along with the principal, and it would also cover the general inflation. So this becomes what I have to invest each year to cover this total cost. And if I add it up for every year, the present value is $446,668. If I invested that at year 1, I would be able to spend $538,357 on medical treatment over these 20 years. And at the end, I'd have a zero balance in my bank account for medical treatment, and I would have spent $446,688. Now you'll notice over here I show you the T.I.P.S rates for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 20 years. And if you look in this, you'll notice that this rate changes. So in the first year, it's 1.68. If I go down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, now it's going to go up to, oops, this isn't the one I sent you, but we're gonna go ahead and fix it right now. We're gonna say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In the 7th year, it should be 1.88. And 9, 7, 8, 9, 10. In the 10th year, it's going to be 2.05. 205. And for the next 10th, 11th, 12th, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years, it's going to be that same rate. It didn't change. I don't know why. Oh, yeah, this isn't mine. Don't understand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5th year, 6th year, 7th year. That's going to be 188. That's correct. Oh, okay. Then that's going to be true for, I'm going to make it the same thing for the 8th, 9th, and then in the 10th year, I'm going to change it to 2.05. And that's correct. Now I'm going to take that and pull it down 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years. Now in the 20th year, it's going to be 2.28. Now that's corrected. So I'm using different discount rates that correspond to the maturity of the investment that I'm making. So for the first number of years, I'm using 1.68. But when I get to that 7th year, in the 7th year, it's going to go up to 1.88. And that's going to stay at that till I go to the 10th year, then it's going to go to 2.05. Then when I go to the 19th year, the 20th year will be 2.28. So now I've got the right discount rates in each year to compute the present value. Now, the formula I use, you may not be used to naming variables. You'll notice that this is a loss. What I did to make that easy to work with is I just took all of these numbers that are really how much I'm going to have to pay, and I called it, in this box up here, I named it loss. So now I don't have to keep putting C1, C2, C3. I can just put the word loss, and it will automatically adjust. Naming variables in Excel saves you a lot of work and a lot of time. So this is what your spreadsheet would look like for one element, for one category of treatment in your life care plan. And you'd have one of these spreadsheets for each category of treatment. And you would then, at the end, add the present values up, take this number, and you would add it for every category, say on a summary sheet. And when you add them up, you are going to get the present value for all categories in the life care plan. And then that's the solution. You've come up with the present value, how much you'd have to invest today to fund the entire life care plan and have enough money to pay for it. So I hope that makes sense.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic, Dr. Moore. So thank you so much for sharing this. This is, especially going over the spreadsheet example, I think everybody would like to increase their Excel skills. So I definitely learned something in this one. So we have a few questions that we got in while we were doing this that I figured I'd throw out to you, just two of them. So the first one is, can you identify things that you would appreciate or would like life care planners to do in the setup of a life care plan? Something that you appreciate, as we all know that life care plans are not the same. So is there something that we can do to set, you up for success or life care planners?
All of the medical and all of the categories of medical treatment and services are increased by the same amount of medical inflation, but there are some categories that simply are not medical. Like there might be something in the life care plan that says every 5th year you have to buy a car with controls on it for the person to drive. Well, I wouldn't expect the price of that car to go up any faster than any other car. So I would make medical inflation, it would not grow. This would be 0. It would just be by itself, 1. It wouldn't grow.
I see.
Now, the other thing is that you do end up with some pieces of equipment, let's say a wheelchair, and every 4 years you're going to buy a new wheelchair. So every 4 years, this may change. And these, how do you handle that? You can handle it one of 2 ways. You can average that cost over these 4 years and say, I'm going to amortize it, or you can find the present value in that 4th year by itself. Either way is correct, and you're going to end up with about the same answer.
Excellent. One more for you. And is there a problem that you run across frequently when doing the economic report?
There are. The biggest problem I run into are categories that you can't put a time frame on. So someone says, over this person's lifetime, they're probably going to need 4 surgical interventions, but we don't know when they're going to happen. So you can't assign them to a year. You can either say, well, here's what the cost is over the whole time period and average it and amortize it. Or what you can do if you have a little better knowledge about the item, you can say, okay, well, the first one's likely to happen in the first 5 years, and the next one, the next 5 years. In other words, you can take and put a time frame on it that's reasonable. It won't be exactly correct, but it'll be reasonable, and it won't distort your life care plan cost very much. But those are the kind of things that are a problem when you can't tie things down to a particular time period.
And that's interesting. That's interesting because it seems like, when you're doing a long-term plan like this, it's like these little things that come up and it kind of just, you have to account for it somehow. But it seems like, averaging or finding, whatever, kind of aggregating the right data just at the right time is the key here.
Yeah, sometimes it just depends on what it is, how long, how many times it happens. Suppose somebody says in a life care plan that at some point this patient's going to need a hip replacement. And that's all they say. And their life expectancy is 20 years. Now, where do you put that hip replacement?
Right.
See, that becomes a problem. So you can either try and get a better estimate of when it would happen from a physician, or, you can average it, but that's not going to give you nearly as accurate a number. You'll probably end up with an average number in the middle, like in the 10th year, it'll end up being in the middle.
And you said that you can more or less mitigate that risk by speaking to experts and kind of just narrowing down on that number, even if it's not exact.
If I was doing a Lifecare plan and I hit an element like that, I'd go to a physician who would be typically doing that kind of procedure, and I'd say, given this patient, you've seen them, you know their comorbidities, you know their medical history. What's your best guess as to when they're going to need a hip replacement? You know that they're going to need one, but how long do you think they can go from now until they're really going to need one to get around? And you use their estimate.
Yeah. Just take it directly from the source. Well, I think with that, thank you so much, Dr.
Way to do it.
That's perfect. No, you are the master, clearly. Thank you for joining MLCC's first medical legal webinar of 2025. A playback of this webinar will be available within 48 to 72 hours. Thank you again for watching, and we look forward to the next session.
Okay.